I live in an apartment. I can't have surround sound. It's annoying. It would absolutely disturb my neighbors. These walls are paper thin. My neighbor's probably listening to this review right now, critiquing it.
You've heard of Colonel Walter E. Kurtz? Your mission is to terminate the Colonel's command.
Terminate. Terminate with extreme prejudice.
Hey guys, welcome to Keeping It Real. I'm Ryan, and today we're going to be talking about another one of my favorite movies, Apocalypse Now.
Someday this war's gonna end.
Apocalypse Now is set at the height of the Vietnam War, right around 1969-1970, although I don't believe that it's actually specified in any version of this film. That being said, right at the height of the Vietnam War, a Captain Willard, who's played by Martin Sheen in this film, is given a very specific mission. His mission is to go upriver to assassinate a colonel who has gone rogue and has taken on a demigod-like status with the locals in the area that he is now occupying. This colonel has been acting on his own accord, making his own decisions with no sanctions from the United States government, and he also has kind of gone a little bit crazy.
November. Kurtz orders assassination of 3 Vietnamese men and 1 woman. 2 of the men were colonels in the South Vietnamese army. Guess he must have hit the right 4 people.
He claims that he did a lot of research, found out that these people were spies, and therefore he executed them. However, this was an unsanctioned move, and therefore the United States government was trying to charge him with murder.
But he kept going,
Now he's crossed into Cambodia.
and he kept winning it his way.
Montagnard army of his.
And they called me in.
A man like a god.
Colonel Kurtz, he basically said, no, that's not going to happen, that's insane, that's crazy, which he kind of has a point given everything that was going on in the Vietnam War. At one point, Martin Sheen, for instance, says,
Charging a man with murder in this place was like handing out speeding tickets at the Indy 500.
it's a dark depiction of what it was like over there, but nonetheless, he says, no, I'm not going to participate in that, and he dips out and goes rogue.
They lost him. He was gone. Nothing but rumors and random intelligence, mostly from captured VC. The VC knew his name by now, and they were scared of him. He and his men were playing hit and run all the way into Cambodia.
So first I'm going to talk about how there are 3 different movies, well, There's 4 different versions of this movie that you can technically watch. One of them is a 5-hour-long work print. The work print is not exactly what I would call a watchable movie. It contains a lot of alternate takes to things, but they play out back to back, so often you see the same thing happen over and over. It fills in a couple of gaps, but it's not really the version that I would recommend that anybody watch, per se. That being said, there is the 1979 theatrical version of this movie.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
It's not the version that I necessarily recommend. Why? Well, because there are 2 more versions of this movie that are 100% watchable and purchasable, for instance. That is Apocalypse Now Redux, which is the most extended version of this movie that was completed. It adds about an hour's worth of footage onto the original theatrical cut. And these were scenes that were cut for various reasons. Francis Coppola at one point said that, there were scenes that were maybe too distracting or that they were too weird. And so a lot of these scenes were cut, or he just felt as though there were scenes that just didn't move the plot forward. In particular, there's a French plantation scene, and quite frankly, he's right. It's an interesting scene, but it doesn't move the plot forward. So things like that were added back into the film. In that sense, it's great. It's got a lot of added stuff in there, and if you like this movie, it's got the most Apocalypse Now. That being said, again, this is not the version that I necessarily recommend. Why? Because the final cut is the version that I recommend that you watch. The final cut of this movie is also director Francis Ford Coppola's favorite version of the film, and this is why we get a nice 4K restoration from the original film cells with this particular version of the movie. The final cut of Apocalypse Now is in between the theatrical and Redux in terms of the amount of footage that is added back in. And so it's shorter than Redux, but longer than the theatrical. And I think that this is the best version of the movie to watch, personally. I think it looks beautiful, especially if you have the opportunity to watch it with the 4K restoration. It doesn't look like the movie was shot yesterday, but it certainly doesn't look 40 plus years old. 41 years old. It certainly doesn't look that old. It looks like maybe 20 years old. It just has the right amount of scenes. There's one scene from Redux that I wish was in the final cut, and that is there's a scene of Marlon Brando reading Time magazine.
The war on the horizon. The American people may find it hard to believe that the U.S. is winning the war in Vietnam. May bring the enemy to the point where he could simply be unable to continue fighting. Is this familiar?
It doesn't add anything to the plot. It's just an interesting scene, and it's Marlon Brando, and it's just cool to watch. It also, for this 4K restoration, Francis Coppola as well as the sound team worked with a company called Meyer Sound. They use these very specific tones and things that make you feel before you hear or see. You can feel the helicopters coming below the trees, and they're about to rise above the trees, and we're about to see them. They're silhouetted on the horizon, and you can actually feel this before you see it and hear it. You just kind of get this rumbling sensation here, but not here. It's a really cool sensory trick if you have a good sound system, because it really adds something. It makes it feel like you're there. This technique has been used for a long time. They use it in horror movies and things like that to build tension, because it's, again, not something you can hear, it's something you can feel. And so, like, when the music drops, for instance, and you know that their character's about to turn the corner and something scary is going to happen, it's actually not silence. There's Meyer sound going on. There are these tones going on that you can't necessarily hear, but you can feel, and it's one of the reasons why it builds tension, especially when you see this in a movie theater. As I already told you, Captain Willard is assigned with going upriver to terminate the command of this Colonel Kurtz, played by Marlon Brando.
Are you an assassin?
I'm a soldier.
You're neither. You're an errand boy, sent by grocery clerks to collect a bill.
Yeah, he didn't really like his lines. He kind of just would say whatever he wanted, and people were like, well, Marlon Brando's in the movie, so we get to put his name on the poster, right? Yeah? Alright, let him do whatever he wants.
At first, I thought they handed me the wrong dossier. I couldn't believe they wanted this man dead. Third generation West Point, top of his class, Korea, airborne, about 1,000 decorations, etc., etc.
There are some fantastical scenes in this film, but this is not a combat film. This film is an atmospheric film. Captain Willard, Martin Sheen's character, most of this movie is his journey along the way and the various stops that he makes with his crew.
Yeah! And to prove it, we're gonna give you some entertainment we know you're gonna like. Miss August, Miss Sangabady, Miss May, Miss Terry Terray, yeah! And the Playmate of the Year, Miss Carrie Foster, yeah!
It was originally only supposed to take 6 weeks to film. This production was hell, and I'm going to get into that in a moment. It ended up taking 16 months. You heard that right. It went from 6 weeks to 16 months. Holy shit. Now, they didn't film in Vietnam. They wanted to, actually. And the studios were like, no, you're going to die. And so they ended up filming most of this film in the Philippines because the terrain was very similar to that of Vietnam. The Filipino government was aware and accommodating. They gave them helicopters, for instance. But one of the setbacks, one of the reasons why the production of this movie was absolute hell is because the Philippines were still in combat situations and things like that with various different things were going on. I'm not going to get into the history lesson of that, but they would take these helicopters away at a moment's notice. And Francis Coppola would be like, what is going on? And then somebody would eventually relate to him, oh, they've been called away for an active combat situation. And he would be like, when are they coming back? And they're like, well, when that's over. And so then the production would halt for until the helicopters came back. Days. Usually.
We were in the jungle, there were too many of us, and little by little we went insane.
In fact, this movie was so intense to make that they actually also have released a full-length documentary called Heart of Darkness. And in this documentary, it chronicles Francis Coppola's struggles making this movie. I don't mean to laugh, it's just like, wow, you made a documentary about how insane this movie was to make. Whew. And by the way, not a moment of this documentary, it's an hour and 35 minutes or something, not a moment of it is boring.
I know that. I have that information.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, just do what I ask. When I say just explain the poem,
And the reason you're explaining the...
But see, I need to know reason.
I'm telling you the reason. I can't ever talk more than a fucking sentence.
It is baffling that so much went wrong. So much went wrong.
The questions that I kept facing, I couldn't answer. Yet I knew that I had constructed the film in such a way that to not answer would be to fail.
And by the way, Martin Sheen had a heart attack, for God's sakes, in the middle of filming and was out for several weeks, and they had to keep filming and they had to shoot around that and then go back and fill in his close-ups. My God, what a trooper, that man. Had a heart attack and came back looking better than when he left. Francis Coppola said, "You look too good." It just really goes to show you, though, that if you stick to your guns and you really take the time to focus, even when everyone's telling you, hey, you're over budget and over long. And Francis Coppola was paying for this movie himself, by the way. And the studio said, if your movie makes $40 million, we'll back your budget up. We'll give you your money back, basically. Like, if you don't make the money back, you owe us. The movie ended up grossing over $100 million in 1979. So, like, that's... Yay. So he did well.
I mean, after all, look at Vietnam. Look at my movie. You'll see what I'm talking.
Wow, what a movie it is. They blew up real helicopters. You see that on film, it's really happening. They were real explosions. They didn't have CGI. That wasn't a joke. They had pyrotechnics.
I'm trying to put Tiger Bomb on this jungle's nuts.
They blew shit up. They blew bridges up. They blew everything up.
Go, 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 go! Here! That's my shit!
They were just, oh my God. They dropped real napalm. It's a really expensive explosion, but it looks really good and it's real. And then, of course, you get one of the most famous lines in all of cinematic history from Robert Duvall's character.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
There it is.
It smells like victory.
Robert Duvall was Oscar nominated for playing this very small role, but this guy was just absolutely insane, and yet is described as being somebody who had an aura around them to the point where you just knew that they were never going to get a scratch on him as long as they were in this war. And so that's how he is kind of set up, as just this like carefree guy who would wear a cowboy hat and made himself a target, didn't flinch at all when explosions are going off around him. There's a great scene where he's standing on the beach, he's got a rifle in his arm, and there's explosions going off because they are in an active war zone where there's shooting going on, and his men are doing all the right things. They're ducking down, they're taking cover, and there's explosions, and his men are, bang! People are trying to avoid it, and he's just...
I think we gotta wait for the tide to come up. Hey, Lance, come here, look! Tide doesn't come in for 6 hours.
He's totally out of his mind and in his own world.
Okay, fellas, quit hiding. Come on. Don't you think it's a little risky for R&R? If I say it's safe to surf this beach, Captain, it's safe to surf this beach.
It's a very interesting film. There's a lot of complex things that go on in this movie, and each scene is very different from the last. There's a scene where they get to the northernmost point of Vietnam where the Americans have posted up before getting into Cambodia. This is the final stand, essentially, and they keep this bridge and they keep rebuilding it, and Charlie keeps blowing it up every night, and they keep rebuilding it just so the generals can say the road is open, and this is the last line of defense essentially. And they get there and they hop off the boat real quick to try to see if they can collect some information and find the CO, maybe some fuel. And they get to the thick of it. Captain Willard takes a guy, one of his men, tripping on acid.
Hey, you know that last tab of acid I was saving?
Yeah.
I dropped it.
You dropped acid? Far out.
And he has a puppy the whole time. I can't even get into that, but he's got a puppy tripping on acid, following Martin Sheen's character, Captain Willard, through this active combat zone in the middle of the night. It's insane. The only light that we get are these flares and explosions and fires that are burning. This scene is really cool, and they discover that there is no CO here, that everyone's just kind of there. At one point, Captain Willard says, "Who's in command here?" And the man turns around and says,
Ain't you?
They call another young man over who has a grenade launcher.
You need a flare?
No. He's close, man.
Without looking, listens to a North Vietnamese soldier, yelling and screaming, and was shooting at them a moment ago, and without looking, he pretty impressive, but kind of scary at the same time that he's that good at it. And Captain Willard says to him,
Hey, soldier. Do you know who's in command here?
Yeah.
I can't even begin to unpack that. The psychological state of that young man. That's what this movie is about. The horror. The horror. There are moments of this movie that are horrifying. Like I said a little bit earlier, you could consider this movie a horror movie from the right perspective. I mean, it's the horrors of war. It's not like literal monsters jumping out at you, but this movie is so atmospheric and makes you truly feel present and along for the ride.
You're looking at the heads. Sometimes he goes too far, you know, and he's the first one to admit it.
He's going crazy.
Wrong. If you could have heard the man just 2 days ago, if you could have heard a man, God, you gonna call him crazy?
Fucking A.
They get towards the end of this film, in terms of filming it, finally, after all these damn setbacks that they've gone through, their saving grace, they're going to have the best actor that's ever lived, Marlon Brando, in the final act of their film.
You don't understand. I could have had class. I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody.
Marlon Brando is on a $1 million contract. What does that mean? Well, at the time, Marlon Brando was doing $1 million per week for his services, for his work as an actor. And they had him for 3 weeks.
The clock was ticking on this deal he had. We had to finish him within 3 weeks or we'd go into a very expensive overage.
This character had been built up to be, like they had already filmed these scenes where they described him as kind of being like this, you know, extremely athletic person.
They must have thought he was some far-out old man humping it over that course. I did it when I was 19. It damn near wasted me. A tough motherfucker.
When Francis Coppola hired Marlon Brando to play this role, he was already overweight.
And he promised me that he was going to get in shape, but he was so fat, he was very, very shy about it. And immediately when I saw him, I said, well, I'll write this as a man who really, had indulged every aspect of himself. So he was fat, and he had 2 or 3, tribal girls with him, and he was very, very adamant about he didn't want to portray himself that way. So, I mean, clearly he had just kind of left me in a tough spot.
And they did hide his weight pretty well in the movie. The behind-the-scenes footage really give away that he's bigger than he comes off in the movie. He's already a tall man, but he was quite overweight, and they overall they did a pretty decent job of hiding that. Francis Coppola sits down with him and learns pretty quickly that Marlon Brando has not read the script, or at least has not memorized his lines, but more has notes. And these notes are rather esoteric, as Francis Coppola kind of describes them.
Marlon's basic notes, as I understood them, as I just glanced at them, were all motivation things. I mean, in other words, it's like getting into saying, well, why is he going on a boat? And I can't answer them because it's too late for me to change the structure.
Then it becomes clear that Marlon Brando has not even read the book, Heart of Darkness, of which the screenplay is based. Shit. Marlon Brando has no idea what's going on.
One of the things Francis said to Marlon from the beginning, read Heart of Darkness, this is what we're going for. Of course, after Francis had some dialogues with him, he realized that that Marlon had never read Heart of Darkness, and it was a complete shock.
Francis Coppola and Marlon Brando got on a boat, the two of them, and took off.
And Francis said, we got to stop shooting, and basically went off for a week with I call it the $1 million riverboat scene, where they go off and pay Marlon $1 million, and 900 people sit and wait. Well, I think, it's my own opinion, that Francis read him the book, Heart of Darkness.
No one knows what happened on that boat ride, really, but they came back and Marlon Brando was ready to shoot. But then also Marlon Brando would hold things up and spend hours talking about the character in the middle of shooting scenes, and they would set the whole crew back, and he took a lot of time.
So the whole company was sitting up on the set around the camera, the crew all poised to go and shoot, and Francis and Marlon would be talking about the character. And whole days would go by.
And they decided pretty quickly that instead of fighting with Marlon Brando every day, they would just let him improvise.
There's a place in the river, I can't remember. Must have been a gardenia plantation or a flower plantation at one time. It's all wild and overgrown now, but for about 5 miles, you'd think that heaven just fell on the earth in the form of gardenias.
It worked out, but they ended up with a lot of footage that makes no sense, because it doesn't fit the plot of the movie, because it's improvised. So there's a lot of footage that they couldn't use. And Francis Coppola was like, we're just going to shoot copious amounts of footage and hopefully some of this sticks. Hopefully some of it makes some kind of sense.
It's irresistible when a bee discovers honey. He is irresistibly driven. My friend laughs. He's my critic. My only critic. Perhaps outside of myself.
Sure. It's weird, but it's oddly cool and prophetic. And a lot of the things that he says are like that throughout the movie.
These men who fought with their hearts, who have families, who have children, who are filled with love, but they have the strength. The strength.
When all was said and done, they actually got some really cool shit. They got some really cool dialogue from Marlon Brando. He actually said stuff that was kind of in line with the character, and it made it pretty cool. And this character was supposed to be insane. This character was described as being off the boat.
Kurtz got off the boat. He split from the whole fucking program.
I feel like if you had no idea who Marlon Brando was, and all you knew of him was the behind-the-scenes stories and footage from Apocalypse Now, you would probably hate him. Because he was a diva. and he caused a lot of setbacks and cost a lot of money.
I can't think of any more dialogue to say.
And he also had a little bit of issues with Dennis Hopper. Dennis Hopper at the time was... He was on another planet.
I was not in the greatest of shape, as far as my career was concerned. It was delightful to hear that I was going to go do anything, anywhere.
Another really cool behind-the-scenes thing about this movie is that towards the end of the film, Martin Sheen's character is sneaking into the compound in order to assassinate Colonel Kurtz, Marlon Brando's character. And during this sequence of him sneaking in, and it's nighttime, and he's, he just comes out of the shadows and cuts a guy's throat and pulls the guy into the shadows kind of thing. Anyways, while that's going down, there's this ritual sacrifice that the native people that Colonel Kurtz has kind of become like their king, their god of. These native people are sacrificing a bull or an ox or something with horns. It's a cow of sorts. It's a cow. These people are actual natives that they hired. It was cheaper to hire the native people, the locals, than it was to dress up actors every day. And so they had the actual locals there, and so they actually sacrificed this animal. The reason I'm bringing all this up is because it's interesting that Francis Coppola's wife is filming behind-the-scenes footage with a personal camera that she has, which is a lot of what makes up that documentary that I mentioned, Heart of Darkness.
My greatest fear is to make a really embarrassing, pompous film on an important subject, and I am doing it.
One of the things that she did on one of their off days was she asked the locals if she could participate, or not participate, but film their sacrifice and their ceremony that they were partaking in. She was so fascinated with this sacrifice and this event that really was taking place that she encouraged Francis Coppola, her husband, to put at least part of it into the movie. And then, of course, he made it atmospheric. They changed it from day to night, and they did various different things with the lighting and everything, and they made it look really good. And it's this really cool scene that spawned spontaneously from being in this area from the locals that were actually there. And it's just a really interesting scene because of that, because it was not part of the script. It just kind of made its way in as a natural and organic thing, and that's how a lot of this movie was made, as a natural and organic moment.
The man's enlarged my mind. He's a poet, warrior in the classic sense. I mean, sometimes you'll say hello to him, right? And he'll just walk right by you, and he won't even notice you. And then suddenly he'll grab you, and he'll throw you in a corner, and he'll say, do you know that if is the middle word in life? If you can keep your head when all about you're losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you. I mean, I can't. I'm a little man. I'm a little man. He's a great man. I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across floors of silent seas. I mean,
Stay with the boat.
Hey, don't go without me, okay? I want to get a picture.
This movie is just really, really cool because it is so authentic, and because they were allowed to, for instance, learn their lines and then forget them and kind of work with what they knew about their character, it creates a very realistic feeling movie. There are people talking over each other in a lot of scenes and stuff like that, and the actors are so good that they don't get distracted by something like that. They actually allow it to flow and be organic, like a real conversation is, or like a real argument. There's a scene where they act as a patrol boat and they stop to do a routine inspection, and oh my god, it ends in brutal violence, but there's the moments leading up to that are a lot of yelling and talking over each other, and a lot of this was improvised improvised and not necessarily scripted, and so it made for a very organic sounding argument, for instance.
What's in that vegetable basket? Don't come. Get out of here. Come on. Get over here. Sheriff, check that vegetable basket. All right. Shut up, Slope. There ain't nothing in here. What's in the boxes? Look in the tin can. Nothing. That rusty can. Just fucking rice in that doll. There ain't nothing on it. Yellow can. Check the yellow can. She was sitting on it. What's in it?
Again, that's how a lot of this movie went. A lot of it was... They followed the script and they knew generally what they were doing, but for the most part, a lot of this dialogue was improvised, and that's really, really cool that this movie was able to pull that off in such a unique way.
I've had the whole goddamn fucking shit, man! Just kiss my ass in the county quick, and I fucking out!
Well, for all of the reasons that I've stated in this review, I'm going to give Apocalypse Now, the final cut, a 100 out of 100. I'm also going to throw in a bonus 100 out of 100 to Hearts of Darkness, a filmmaker's apocalypse, for being just such a compelling documentary. And I not only recommend that everyone go out and watch Apocalypse Now, but that you also find a way to watch Hearts of Darkness. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been Keeping It Real. I'm Ryan, and I will see you for the next review.
You take the others who are made to think but who can't act. You take... I swallowed a bug.
Go, 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 go! Let's go freaking get here! That's my shit! Mother Nature just pissed her pantsuit!